Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, October 30th, 2025. Time for another show under the cloud of a continuing, lingering cold. I think you can probably hear it in the voice. Nothing hurts, but, it's just one of those messy days. But thankfully, we've got Greg Dworkin on hand with a raft of stories to carry us through a full hour of today's show. I think we can make it to the end. I still have question marks floating over my head, cartoon style. Well, just generally, that's just the usual day. But about the Friday show, I'm a little concerned about the ability to make it through 2 hours there. But I'll monitor things, and we'll try and make sure you have some content to keep you company. It might be a good idea to try and, if I've still got the energy after the show today, record a couple of things that might make for good breaks tomorrow. Play some pre-recorded bits along with some live stuff. I don't know. We'll see if I can make it work out. And it makes sense. All right. So in the meantime, the guy who says he's president of the United States, I guess, is on his way back here for some reason. I don't know why. We don't have a government for him to run. We're still shut down. Day 30 of the continuing government shutdown. By the way, the record for longest government shutdown held previously by the Trump administration last time around, 35 days. So figuring they're not going to solve anything today or tomorrow or over the weekend, we're pretty much looking at, I guess, we'll be tied up on that around Election Day, hey, as it happens. So, if you're not busy that day, you might want to sit around and pop I don't know, what do? You open champagne to tie the record for government shutdown? Not in this economy, you don't. So, I don't know. Anyway, that's in the offing. The president on his way back after having spent one more day in Korea, where he met with President Xi of China, and by most accounts, got raked over the coals and he struck a deal. The headline I grabbed from the New York Times was essentially, I don't think I have it in front of me right now, but it was essentially that Trump was given a thing that he could walk away and say was a deal and a win. Tariffs lowered by a little bit. China pretty much got what they wanted out of it. They took the concessions as they could get them and made no promises for all the big problems that we have with them, allegedly, over soybeans, rare earths, the like. So, I don't know. Make of it what you will, I suppose. All right. Well, we used the Halloween fanfare to bring Greg in the other day, just in case we weren't able to do it today. I got a couple other ones on hand that are labeled short fanfare, but I think they run about 15 seconds. So put your feet up, Greg, and take a nap as we ring you in with the short fanfare that happens to be on tap. Come on now, YouTube, do your stuff. Let's see. Like a feature film, Greg.
Good morning. I was thinking of movie theaters. I can't place that one.
This is, let's see, what is it? It's a short fanfare, and I don't want it to play again, but Archives. I didn't want it to play it again. Archives Series Volume 4. That has lots of historical black and white photographs of the film industry and early newsreel days, but I don't see.
Yeah, it felt like theater. It felt like, this is right after they fire the guy who plays the piano.
Right. We don't need you anymore.
Or whatever.
We got this guy. All right.
They did that for silent movies, kids. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. They could bring that back. They could bring that back now as some sort of artisanal thing that they play the piano in the theater. Oh yeah, it's very high class, and the tickets cost 7 times more. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well,
that's never been done.
I grew
before.
up at the New York Rangers, Eddie Layton at the organ.
Yeah, I think all I got out of that was sort of they did have organ players at the ballparks, I think, and then skating rinks.
Yep,
continued to do that for some time.
So I want to do a follow-up on a story we mentioned the other day.
All right, good. Do I have to say
The
anything?
Times, parentheses, of London, and
Boom.
parentheses.
Yeah, okay.
They don't call themselves of London anymore. They're just the Times, but you're supposed to know that. The New York Times and the Times are completely separate
Yeah, but
organizations, and the Times of London
they love doing that with that stuff. Like the Open. You mean the
had a
British
fake
Open?
interview with a fake guy
Yeah. Oh,
who was a
right.
real guy. They said that they talked to Bill de Blasio, and Bill de Blasio really didn't like Zoran Mamdani, and they thought that was a big story, and they
Yeah.
had it online for about an hour and a half until people identified the fact that if you actually ask the real Bill de Blasio for comment, he said, "That's not me. I don't know what they're talking about. They never asked me nothing."
Oh,
So they pulled the
right.
story.
Sure. Okay.
The New York
Yeah, there was
Post ran
somebody
with it
said they
and
were Bill de
realized it was a
Blasio.
fake story, so they changed the story and said, "This didn't happen, but it easily could have because that's probably how he thinks."
What? Okay.
So, yeah,
I'm
okay,
not sure
fine.
what. Okay. Didn't
However,
happen?
how did it happen? How did this whole
It
mess happen?
didn't.
Semaphore got to the bottom of it. And as they say, the man at the heart of a high stakes mix up that rippled through global political journalism in the final days of the New York mayoral campaign was neither falsely claiming to be former Mayor Bill de Blasio, as the Times of London suggested, nor, as the New York Times wrote, a de
Ah.
Blasio impersonator. Both of them got it wrong. He is instead a
What?
59-year-old Long Island wine importer named, wait for it, Bill de Blasio, who
I
merely
see.
responded to an
Now I
email
get it.
from a journalist seeking his views on Democrat Zoran Mamdani's policies.
What's his
"I'm Bill
email?
de Blasio. I've always been Bill de
Yeah.
Blasio," Bill de Blasio said in an
Well,
interview
he's
conducted
right.
Wednesday evening through his Ring doorbell.
I heard he went as
Huntington Station,
William.
Long Island, where my brother-in-law lives. I could ask my
Oh,
brother-in-law to go over there
where
and
was it? In Long Island?
yeah. But he's currently
Oh, don't
in
give the
Florida. They
address,
went to
but
his house
oh, okay.
and they wanted to interview him. So I guess his Ring doorbell is set up so that if you ring the
Hmm.
doorbell, he answers in Florida.
That's okay. That's actually a good use of technology, I guess.
And his response was, "I never once said I was the mayor. They never addressed me as mayor. They asked me my
Hmm.
opinion. I
Come
gave him
on.
my opinion."
Sure,
Because, like,
man.
he's a New Yorker. Of course he is. I mean,
He's a
that's like a
Floridian.
given. Look, I know I'm not the person that
Yeah.
you contacted for
Get serious.
their expertise, but I am a New Yorker, and God damn it, I have an opinion.
Hmm.
You're going to hear about it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I like it.
yeah. I mean, I guess he's entitled to give that. That's funny. They never bothered to address him that way. I don't know whether. I wonder had they said, "Mr. Mayor, please
Right.
tell
So
us,"
it gets
would he
better,
have
though.
said, "I'm not the mayor"? Okay. Yeah.
It gets
Better.
better.
Well, good. There's room for
The
better.
Times reporter, this is the Times of London, was
Boo.
researching an article looking at Zoran Mamdani's policy plans and their estimated costs. "I would
Why?
greatly appreciate your insights on Mamdani's ambitious agenda, potential obstacles, and whether it adds up."
Okay, London.
So Long Island de Blasio understood the situation, this piece says. "I could have
Mm.
corrected him," he said. "Instead, he played along and used ChatGPT to compose a response criticizing Mamdani's tax plans,
He
in
didn't even do it
particular, as
himself.
unlikely to raise the requisite revenue."
You're right. That is better.
Is that great? That is
Chat
a total New York
GPT.
story.
Wow. Okay. Except for the part that took place in Florida and London, and I do
No,
wonder why the
that
London
part
part.
is also very New York.
Well, yeah, I guess so. That's true too. I mean,
Uh,
it happened
there are tons
elsewhere,
of
but
snowbirds from up here who go down to Florida for the cooler
true.
weather.
And they take New York with them.
Mm.
In a way. Well,
Take
that
their
is
attitudes,
interesting. Yeah. So I wonder what his. Now I'm curious what his email is. I guess they're not going to give it out, but like, I'm curious just what did
Well,
the New
it's
York,
Bill
what
de
London
Blasio
Times?
at ihaveopinions.com.
Yeah. Right. Well, I'm wondering, is it that or is it like, Bill de Blasio 69 1488 at, come on now. That's not Bill de Blasio. Like, is it?
Yeah, the
Who knows?
1488 is a dead giveaway.
Yeah, right. I would not buy into that one, but
Right.
the other one could be true. Anyway,
So let's look a little bit about what's actually going on
okay.
in New York City. So as you probably
As though
have
London
heard, and I may have
cares.
mentioned it once or twice on the show, um, there's an election in a week.
Right. Voting for the
Same as
best
in
deli.
Virginia. I'm actually going to go vote in my local election today. I
Oh,
think I get to vote early.
all
I
right.
like this voting early
Yeah,
stuff.
if it's in Virginia, there's no election for best deli because there's just
Mm,
not a best deli.
mm.
Sorry. All right. Well, I thought we were doing New
So this is
York.
about New York City mayor. And there's
Oh, okay.
a
Then we
flurry of
are
polls
popular.
that came out in the last few days. And I have some observations about the polls that others have made, and I'll repeat them to make myself sound smart.
All right.
This is Adam Carlson
Use
writing. An average
ChatGPT.
of polls in the New York City mayor's race released in the last few days show Mamdani leading Cuomo by 15 points. Cuomo's
Great.
not
Stop
hit
polling.
35% in any publicly released three-way poll, that is to say, featuring Curtis Sliwa, since June. And the average of the last five polls that came out, one of which was uh, a partisan poll from the Manhattan Institute,
Okay.
tend to be very conservative slash libertarian.
By the way, get out of
But
Manhattan.
and they in Quinnipiac had the lowest numbers from Mandami, 43, and they had Cuomo at 33 and 28, and a bunch of undecideds. Everybody else is pushing the undecideds to answer. Push the leaners,
I
as they
mean,
like to
they'll
say.
answer you on Tuesday. But okay.
Emerson had the highest, 50-25, and so the average is 45.6 for Mamdani, who's going to win. Cuomo at 30, who's going to lose. And
He's
Sliwa
closing
has
the
a
gap.
very consistent 16%,
All right.
ranges 14 to 19, up to 21. But that's about where he's been the entire time,
Yeah.
16, 17.
6% of it comes from Staten Island.
Yeah, yes, you have
They
been
got the
a
whole
long-time
thing.
listener, first-time caller, and so you
Yes.
understand that's what's going
Right.
on
I
here.
don't know where the other 10% comes from, but everybody on Staten Island and then a smattering of other people from around the city.
Right. Over in
Mrs. Lewa,
Virginia,
the
Roanoke College
cats.
poll
Yeah.
out today. Really kind of interesting. Uh, it's interesting because I don't believe it for a
Hmm.
minute. Governor
Okay.
Spanberger 51, Earl Sears 41. So 10-point spread. Keep that in mind.
Okay.
Remember the number 10. Lieutenant
Ah, ah,
Governor
ah,
Hashmi,
ah.
Democrat 42, Reed 40.
Hmm.
Now, I don't believe that that's true, as Sam Shirazi points out. Lieutenant Governor, nobody knows who the Lieutenant Governor is. And if you're going to vote for Spanberger, you're going to vote for Hashmi.
In
That's,
all
you know,
likelihood, I would say yes. Spanberger's not that wildly popular. That doesn't explain it either. I mean, she's nice
right.
enough, but come on.
And for Attorney General, Miari's
Ah,
at 46, Jones at 38.
yuck. Yeah,
Okay.
maybe I won't
But,
believe that
but,
one either.
well, I don't believe that one either. I mean, Miari's has been at 45, 46 in like most polls. The question is
Yes.
where Jones is, and this is the lowest for Jones like ever.
He's been getting,
With a bunch of undecideds.
a
All those
slew of
undecideds may
ads.
be Democrats who break for him. We don't know. It's certainly, as I've said all along, it's very possible Miari's holds on. But on the other hand, if you're looking at as a traditional race,
Sure, why not?
46 and not breaking 50 for the incumbent isn't great. So
Hmm.
we'll see what happens there. And then here are the interesting numbers, part of the reason I don't believe it.
Oh,
Trump approval, 53% disapprove, 40 approve. That I can
what?
buy. Youngkin
Yeah?
approval, 50 approve, 36 disapprove. Those are the best Youngkin numbers I've seen in
Hmm.
weeks because a
Maybe
lot of these
ever.
polls that are looking at the election next week also poll Youngkin. One of them even had him underwater. So again, I think the lesson there is like, what kind of electorate are you looking at here?
Hmm.
How
Weird.
Republican is it? Because if it's really Republican, hey, guess what? The Attorney General is doing really well. And in fact, looking at New Jersey, two polls out also similar, Emerson and Coefficient,
Hmm.
which is a very Republican poll that leans very Republican and differs from the others, but Emerson agrees, has Mikey Sherrill up only by a point, Citarelli finally getting to 47.
Oh, well,
Remember, he's been stuck at 43, 44 the entire time in most other
yeah,
polls.
cut it out and put it in a scrapbook.
So Noah Wyckoff Rudnick, I can't send you the direct link because he blocks
Oh,
his Twitter account, so you
yeah,
wouldn't be
just
able
as
to
well.
post it.
Okay. Too
So
many
he
names
says one thing
anyway.
they're doing is weighting age directly to the 2021 electorate on the voter file. 2021 was older, but I think they're missing that people 18 to 21 couldn't vote 4 years ago. So now they can. So that's part of it. And essentially, it's kind of an amateur move not to adjust for that on top of copy pasting the breakdown from 2021.
Ah,
So Emerson also did the same thing as Coefficient with a Murphy plus 3-year electorate, betting on a large election day GOP surge that isn't showing up in the early vote. And the reason I talk about this, and the reason I talk about Virginia, is that this isn't the old days, and here's the important point, where persuasion is picked up by polling. The utility of polling in a polarization age should focus more and more on how come you choose the electorate you do, when
Mhm.
you can predict 95% of voters' intentions.
Yeah. All right.
So it's pretty okay. Look, if you're a 27-year-old moderate who works in Northern Virginia for the government, I know how you're going to vote. The question is, are you going to show up?
Well,
And
you have
so the
time on your
question
hands.
about these polls is, well, I'm doing this in a way that reflects what the election looked like 4 years ago in an off year.
Yeah.
And like the world has changed. Yeah, but I'm still going to look at it as if it's the same electorate and nothing has changed whatsoever. Okay, when you do that, you risk having a poll that's just like completely wrong.
Yeah.
And so for those reasons, I'm a little skeptical of all the polls right now. It's a week beforehand. I don't think there's going to be tremendous amount of movement in any of these races in the last week. I just don't buy that.
I think you could stop polling New York.
And I think what's going on here is that you have different pollsters jumping in and deciding that their picture of the electorate is better than that other guy pollster's picture of the
Ah,
electorate. And so I'm
that's why
giving
they're
you
doing
my
it.
impression as opposed to their impression, but nothing has changed. There isn't movement in the electorate toward one person or another person. It's just guesses as to who's going to show up.
That's
So
an
right
interesting
now,
thing.
the polls are really not going to help you all that much. It's
Uh,
pretty clear
I don't either.
Mondami's going to win. Pretty clear Spanberger's going to win. After that, we'll see. Probably Mikey Sherrill's going to win. Pretty good chance. These polls don't change things. This is not movement toward Citarelli. These are, oh, I'm guessing, unlike the other polls, that this is going to be a
Yeah.
really conservative electorate.
Interesting. So there's a professional competition going on now. It's not to predict necessarily the outcome. They're not going to predict any change in the outcome of the race. It's just, all right, well, now it's time to put up your numbers so that when they rank pollsters afterwards, who
Yes,
got
yes,
closest, you have your latest showcase showdown bid in. $1 over the other guy, whatever it is.
that's exactly right. My secret sauce is better than your secret
Yeah.
sauce, and
All right.
besides, it's bigger too.
Yes, in a larger container and
Hmm.
whatever. But
But it also costs more.
yes, well, because we manufacture it outside the country and it's tariffed.
Yeah. So that's what's going on with polls. Interesting. But
Yeah.
this is at this particular point, it's like, stop with the polls already. Let's just have the election. Well, we are having the
Yes, I know.
election,
I'm tired of it.
and the election's leaning Democratic, and that doesn't mean anything because it is traditional for Democrats to lean in the early vote, and then the electorate leans Republican on election day, except if they don't,
Mm.
it's a big win for Democrats, and if they do, it's a tight race. And that conventional wisdom still holds until it doesn't. So we'll see what
Huh.
happens
I was
on Tuesday, which
thinking,
is less than a week from now.
that's right. And I was thinking about as you were profiling or discussing the profiles of the electorate in, say, Northern Virginia, moderate voters, government employees. A lot of moderate voting government employees with extra time on their hands if you're worried about whether they're going to show up or not. A government shutdown gives them all day to vote. But on
Right,
the other hand, they're probably 90+% turnout people anyway, honestly.
right.
That
And they're not
gang
all
is
Democrats,
voting before work. Yeah, that's true too.
right?
And
Maybe you are if you work for the Department of Transportation, and maybe you're not if you work for, well, I don't know,
dodgy
one of the
ICE.
FBI things that isn't open,
Right.
if there is such a thing.
Yeah. Maybe your
But
cash
it's
patel's
really hard to
pilot.
know. You got a lot of disgruntled Republicans not happy with what's going on in the current government that get
Yeah.
interviewed all the time. That's become the new Virginia diner, West Virginia diner. So,
Yeah.
they got to exist. They're not
Maybe,
Democrats.
but like Bill de Blasio, it's the wrong guy. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's the wrong guy.
Yeah.
So I
I'm in a
was
diner.
looking
It's just
around for
not here.
interesting things, and I have this really good friend,
Yeah.
online friend, never met,
Huh. Ooh.
who is Indian from like the country India,
Okay. Yes, I see.
and really interested in how Zohran Mamdani's campaign is going,
All right. India mentioned.
and is fluent in things I am not at all fluent in. And this article that I'm going to discuss is
Hmm.
fascinating to me because I always like learning about things I don't know. And this is
Sure.
about the changing face of New York City politics. but also the subtleties and nuances which this article starts to pick up about the Muslim vote, and
Hmm.
particularly the Indian vote,
Hmm.
as Zoran Mandani campaigns.
This is equally applicable to Northern Virginia in uh, with increasing frequency. It's a very
All
large and
right.
growing
And a
population
lot of
here.
this article is about the case system.
All right. Oh,
And well, that's interesting. That
yeah.
doesn't usually become a relevant point in New York City politics, but it is
Yeah, you
right
kind of
now,
avoid that ordinarily. All right, let's hear it.
right? What Zohran Mamdani's campaign says about the quiet erasure of caste
Uh, yeah, I don't know.
in U.S.
Cast,
politics.
I guess. Okay.
As temples become key sites for candidates' visits, New York's mayoral races revealed broader tensions between Dalit advocates, those who are anti-caste,
Hmm. All right.
and the rising Hindu right, which are really into it.
Ooh.
Okay,
Okay,
don't
I could
forget
see that.
Modi
The right
in
being
India
into it.
is supported by right-wing people.
Yeah, very much part of that
So they
gang.
write, on Diwali, the most important festival in the Hindu calendar, also celebrated by Sikhs and Jains, Democratic nominee Zoran Mandani hosted one of the most unusual events of the New York City mayoral election so far, in a race that's already seen him host a scavenger hunt, walk the length of Manhattan in an evening, and most recently organize a soccer tournament in Coney Island to promote his affordability platform. So
Okay.
unusual is a high bar to cross, but the event, where Mamdani, along with his filmmaker mother, Mira Nair, and actor and former
Yes.
Obama staffer Cal Penn, distributed
Hmm.
traditional Desi sweets out of a small Indian store in Queens. One of the
Cool.
first times that South Asian politics, and please don't make the mistake that Andrew Cuomo makes.
Oh dear.
South Asian is not Southeast Asian.
Ah, right. Okay. There's an east in there. That's the difference.
South Asian politics was so overtly mirrored in the city's local elections, similar to politicians in India who often distribute sweets on Diwali, particularly ahead of an election. Mamdani signaled to his South Asian voter base he's one of them. And for
Hmm.
the rest, it was proof that his team seemingly had an endless array of creative ways to engage with New Yorkers.
It's food again.
Now, it's not unusual. You would not be surprised if I told you that people running for mayor in New York City would make stop-offs
Right.
at the temples, synagogues, and shuls of New York City.
Right. That's
That
what I thought of when you said
indicating
temple,
whether or not
but
you
no.
are Reformed, Conservative, or Orthodox.
Yes, that'll help.
That's just like part of the framework. Everybody in New York City understands those terms, grows up there, knows. Of course, you're going to do that. It's part of the deal.
Yes, although increasing use of shul among reform. But okay.
But
Yes.
if you are, well, again, and so thank you for that comment. What that points out is the subtlety and nuance to all of this,
Yes.
which is often overlooked by people just writing articles about it or people reading articles about it uh, over the internets. But they matter. And those small, subtle differences make a huge difference. So when Cuomo, who has assiduously avoided any Muslim areas at all until like 2 weeks ago,
Oh, all right. Hmm.
starts to do it, it's really noticeable. So earlier that day, Mamdani had visited four more temples in Queens, adding to the two he had visited in October. And at one of them, while addressing previous comments in which he called Indian Prime Minister Modi a war criminal,
Hmm.
Mamdani talked about a pluralistic vision of India that he grew up with, where everybody belonged no matter their religion, and compared it to that of the Modi government, who only has
Hmm.
room for certain kinds of Indians.
Yes.
Maintaining his reconciliatory streak, Mamdani also added he's running to be the mayor of a city where many might feel differently about Modi, but he promised to represent them equally and ensure they're safe and they can afford the city. The video, which was taken by this reporter for the New Lines magazine,
Hmm.
has since gone viral in India and forced many, including some of Mamdani's critics, to acknowledge his measured response.
All right.
But he's far from the only mayoral candidate to have taken advantage of Diwali to get close to South Asian New Yorkers. Cuomo launched South Asians for Cuomo on the eve of Diwali, mocked thoroughly
Sure.
for confusing South Asians with Southeast Asians.
Oh.
Republican Curtis Lewa dropped by some of the same temples that day. If until now, the influence and visibility of South Asian New Yorkers were simmering under the surface, Diwali marked a turning point when, in a fitting metaphor, it finally exploded onto New York's political scene.
Yes.
So between the
Fireworks, a big
multiple
part.
temple visits and each candidate's attempts to court Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh voters, since the primary, both Cuomo and
Jains.
Mandami have also visited several gurdwaras and mosques as part of their campaigns. The absence of a political group that until recently was fairly prominent in mainstream American discourse, and they stood out. They are the Dalits, a term of self-description for members of formerly untouchable caste in India, Nepal, and parts of Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Remember, there's a large contingent that actually got their language put on the official New York City ballot we talked about.
Yes,
yesterday.
right. You did mention that.
And that's one of the reasons why I like to connect things,
Yeah.
So Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka were missing from the conversation for whatever reason, probably because they're wealthier and educated. Many of the Indians in this particular community, the doctors I know, are from Sri Lanka.
Ah, okay.
And that doesn't necessarily reflect all of Indian politics.
No, not at all, but okay.
So
Yeah,
we'll talk about
learning
this
all
more
these
after the
things.
break. I hear the
Sure.
music, but this is just a fascinating
It's Indian
look
music.
into a group of people who probably are not being picked up by the polls because, like, who polls these people?
Yeah,
And in
well,
what language?
like sort of everybody around here. It's quite amazing. Very assertive politically, the community, and lots of candidates for state and local office everywhere, all across Northern Virginia, which is kind of fantastic. And the number of biryani restaurants exploding as well.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're still going through. There's more, isn't there, Greg, to this analysis of the Indian American voting community in New York?
Yeah, well, I think
Okay.
it's just fascinating. And this
I
is
am
just a
interested.
little
We have so many
tidbit I get
neighbors here.
from looking at the internets. Dalits are not a majority in India, but they form a large minority group. They're about 16% of the
Everything's
total
large.
population, but we're talking about India. So
Yeah.
16% of the total population means we're talking about like 165 million people.
that is correct.
That's
They
an
have
actual number.
several
That's
people in
16% of the
India.
total population, 166.6 million people.
Yeah.
And they're
awful lot of
officially
people.
recognized as a scheduled caste and are constitutionally distinct from other minorities, but they're still a marginalized group. They don't necessarily get their share of education opportunities, appointments to government, so on and so forth. So
All
in
right,
India, it's
we're
a big
familiar with
deal.
that.
And the people who are being discussed in this article are well familiar with it, way more than I am.
Sure.
But I just think
It's
it
their
was
culture.
interesting. So As the Democratic nominee for mayor, Mamdani has recently been focused on consolidating the Hindu vote and has so far not addressed caste in his campaign. Although he was set to visit one of the temples in Queens, he had to cancel because scheduling conflicts. And the only Dalit place of worship in the city was that, and it's among the few South Asian places of worship that none of the current mayoral candidates have visited so far. And it's unclear if they will before the election.
Yeah, they'll either all go or
there's some
none.
nuance going there. There's tension between the Hindu right and the Dalits in terms of political points of view. And Mamdani seems to be avoiding it by not going to the one place that they congregate, even though he's hitting most of the others. And the other candidates are staying far away from it because they don't understand anything about it, and they think all Indians are Southeast Asians anyway.
Yes, if they even think that they should be allowed in the country, if you're talking about certain types of candidate.
Now, he is not, Mamdani is pretty clear about where he stands politically. He's visited certain temples where advocacy around caste is met with hostility. And it's pretty clear that, he doesn't support the caste system. So that part's clear.
Okay.
And the article says, while Mamdani's not the only candidate to visit various more right-leaning strongholds, if you will, around the city, his visits generated mixed reactions among Dalits as well as other dominant caste Hindu New Yorkers, many of whom believe Mamdani could have avoided visiting that particular stronghold given the organization's checkered past and alleged caste-based exploitation. So a Dalit resident from Queens who also canvassed for Mamdani said, him supporting, I don't think he supports, anti-caste policies. It's just part of the campaign. Many Hindu New Yorkers, as well as supporters in India, have celebrated Mamdani's appearance at right-leaning temples. So there's that undercurrent, which I think Mamdani fully understands and is being delicate and inclusive and trying to avoid issues. And what I'm saying is that the other candidates from New York, Andrew Cuomo, just step in it.
Yeah. Well, he won't know where to go. And
he'll go to the wrong place and celebrate the wrong things. But given the prominence of South Asian New Yorkers in this election, animated by Mamdani's efforts to canvass communities he shares a background with, caste has become a valid talking point, especially because Hindu temples, where Dalits like this reporter often don't feel welcome, have emerged as a fertile ground for canvassing by New York's mayoral candidates.
Yes. All right.
So just, again, a fascinating look at a subculture, nuanced issues outsiders wouldn't necessarily understand, but it's a big deal. And so when you're trying to get as many votes as possible from people who maybe don't ordinarily vote or don't ordinarily vote Democratic, it's quite interesting. And again, one of the things that Mamdani has reminded me about is the historical campaigns, not just of John Lindsay, who we have mentioned, he's fresh where everybody else is tired, but who I've also mentioned is Fiorello LaGuardia.
Yes.
And again, in the musical LaGuardia, you get a feel for that as he goes and campaigns in various languages of the different ethnic groups in New York. But the ethnic groups in New York are changing.
Yes. That's always been the case.
That has always been the case. And so those who have ties to the newer communities and can campaign effectively with them have a leg up in elections. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. Well, he'll know his way around there. I imagine that I was listening to the part of the story when you were mentioning, okay, Mamdani has visited this place, and then, Cuomo followed, and even Sliwa showed up too. There's also the internal politics of the temple itself, wherein if someone expresses an interest in showing up and doing an event, very often the rest of the membership says, now we got to invite everybody else or else we're going to look political. So make sure you invite them. And then, not always true. But it's
I know some Orthodox shuls, for
Oh, yeah.
example, in New York, who would say we don't want them.
right.
I don't care about looking inclusive. You're not welcome here.
More people who where the balance of life is a little more towards the secular side very often say, well, won't that make us look partisan? We have members of both parties, presumably, or in this case, all three. And we just want to extend we want to extend the invitation so that if the other guy wins, we don't look like they were excluded from here, but we know he's not going to show up. So give the invitation because there's no risk. It's very interesting. So there's subtleties on both sides here. Who gets invited where? And in all likelihood, these are a lot of stops that probably Cuomo and Sliwa never thought to ask anyone to schedule, but they read in the paper, hey, he went to this one and this one. I get me an invitation to there. I got to go speak. All right. I can't look like I'm being excluded from there, even though I don't know what to tell them and I don't even know what part of the world they're from.
Right.
Okay. In case you were wondering why.
Now, this other really interesting piece, which I really can't do justice with because it is painting a portrait in words about Eric Adams, and reading snippets of it doesn't really do it justice.
Okay.
He has his smoothie, his vegetable smoothie with carrot sticks as he's speaking to the reporter, Molly Ball. That's all part and parcel of who he is. It's interesting
smoothie,
because Adams clearly is disgraced and failed. He doesn't see it that way. Surprise, surprise.
I can't believe
He says, I could have made better choices, but I had a city to run. And when you look at it, even with the crew that I assembled, there was not one year that we weren't moving the city forward. He's been punished as he sees it for telling unpopular truths, harassed by an unfair justice system, hammered by a biased press, his achievements diminished by a system he threatened. Does this remind you of anybody? It should.
Yes.
These are sort of the same talking points that Donald Trump uses, and yet...
Maybe it's just a New York thing.
In the case of Eric Adams, there's a lot of truth to it.
Okay.
He was pushing housing, and he's probably, just like George W. Bush did a good thing with PEPFAR and AIDS prevention, which Trump destroyed.
All right.
Eric Adams has actually done some reasonably good things in an objective sense. Not perfect. Everybody's going to be unhappy. It's New York City. But he's done a pretty good job in setting up more housing to be built, which was something that a lot of his predecessors had trouble doing. When you are willing to come in like a bull in a china shop and wreck things, on occasion, like Robert Moses, can get stuff done.
Yeah, well, he did get things done.
Right, and has a terrible reputation now because the way he got things done is displace a lot of people for his own, purposes.
Tearing down the White House.
But it does shake things up, and it does get stuff done. So it's hard not to think about what might have been, says Molly Ball. Juan Williams, the Fox News analyst who's known Adams since the 60s when Playboy assigned him to write a profile of the young lieutenant who'd risk his career to testify about racism in the NYPD. That's part of Adams' background. There was so much energy and determination, a sense this guy was going somewhere. He's going to take other people with him, especially black people. But I don't think there's any question it's his fault. He's selfish. It clouded his thinking, his sense of right and wrong. All of that's true. And he is isolated and he is diminished. Mm-hmm. But when you step back and try to figure out, well, what should the city do?
Okay.
It brings questions that really need to be answered. As one ex-user argued, Eric Adams is legitimately insane, literally committed treason in exchange for airline miles. We'll talk about that, the Turkish connection. And that's what he was being investigated for by the federal government. But he's also the only New York City mayor in 50 years to make progress on the two biggest issues the city has, trash and housing.
Those are big, and you can win. If you can win on traffic here, you can win on trash and housing there.
Yeah, Adams pushed through basically a rule, a law, a regulation that if you have trash outside on the street, it has to be in a container with a top on it, which has done a lot to cut down the rat population.
Yeah, you can't believe that wasn't true already, but yeah.
Well, that's the thing.
Right.
That's the thing. It wasn't true already.
That's nuts. Well, as I was thinking about, if you're I guess if you're the kind of voter that was reading Playboy for the articles, you would have learned this about him early on.
That's right. Yeah. Adams cut billions from the budget and took on entrenched urban nonprofits, weathering criticism from homelessness advocates when he ramped up the city's use of involuntary commitment for those with severe mental illness,
Mhm.
a policy Mamdani has vowed to roll back. His chief of
Yeah.
staff tells me Adams has a skepticism of government grounded in his upbringing. He feels the city failed his family, and that drives him away. I don't know if he understands. I always think of you as Batman, I tell him, and not just because you like to go out at night.
Hmm.
New Yorkers are not convinced. 61% of respondents said the things in the city are bad. Just 22% said crime had decreased over the last 4 years, and 46% said it increased. That's not true. Anna Maria Arquila, co-director of the left-wing Working Families Party, says Adams doesn't deserve credit for declines in crime where rates have been falling nationally. Adams, she says, has been too willing to see police as the answer. And this is a whole discussion
He's
about
police.
Mandami's policies here. Now we're talking policy.
Okay.
Should you have more civilians answer calls for 911 when in fact it's homeless and mentally ill issues and not send the police for this?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
Mandami thinks you should, and
Right.
that more calls should go to non-cops, saving the cops to go for the gunshots, murders, and other things that in fact happen in New York City. Now,
Yes. You
it
would
turns
think that's
out
where they should be.
nonpartisan reviewers of this, and I've looked this up elsewhere at another time. I don't have these articles right in front of me, but about 10% of the calls that New York City gets could be answered by civilians. But it's not 20, 30, 40. It's not going to transform the way things work. So saying his suggestions are ridiculous and you shouldn't do it for advocates of the police force who want to make sure there's as many jobs as possible for the police is one thing. And saying that this is going to transform the city is another. It's probably good policy. It's probably a good idea. Other people have done it in other places, but it's only going to be a very small percentage of the calls you get. So that needs to be kept in perspective.
Okay. Fair.
And yet it's going to be a political, thing. So for him to retain Adams' current New York Police Department commissioner, Jessica Tisch, who everybody agrees is doing a good job, and it's hard for everybody to agree somebody's doing a good
Yeah.
job in New York
While they're
City.
doing it.
But he's going to keep her, he says,
Hmm.
and at the same time look to perhaps change a little bit, tweak the New York City Police Department. Isn't and shouldn't get the same kind of reaction that Bill de Blasio, the real one, not the
Oh.
Long Island one, got from the police force when they turned his back on him every time he spoke.
Yes. They love doing that.
They love doing that.
And they'll likely do it to any Democrat.
And this is an interesting story. And again, it gets back to I understand what's right, and then I understand what wins. And I'm not saying you should do the wrong thing if it helps you win. You just need to understand the nuance here. Political leaders are often defined not by the plans they make, but by the crisis forced upon them. For Adams, it was the migrant surge.
Hmm.
When he came into office, the Biden administration was insisting there was no crisis at the border. Greg Abbott began sending buses of asylum seekers to Washington in protest. Adams said Abbott's action was shameful, urged him to let them come to New York City where we can take care of them. So Abbott started sending them to New York City.
Well, what can I tell you? You asked.
But that happened.
Okay.
Right? A year
Yeah.
later, Adams' tone changed. New York was spending billions housing the migrants. Numbers had reached six figures in shelters, encampments, leased hotels, and a cruise terminal. Adams began criticizing the administration, saying Biden had failed New York City. In private meetings, he urged Biden and his team to secure the border. He said administration officials urged him to be quiet.
Yeah.
It's like gallstones. It'd be painful, but it would pass. Just tough it out. Adams was not happy. He was cutting back library hours to pay for the shelters. He was taking political heat for giving handouts to migrants, not satisfying. Adams wondered who was really in charge at the White House. In his later meetings with Biden, he says he noticed a marked decline, suspected the president wasn't well served by his staff. He found himself frozen out by the White House, dropped from the advisory council of Biden's reelection campaign. The article goes on to suggest that this is where, from Adams' perspective, he started to get the feeling the Biden people didn't want to hear from him. And therefore, when the Justice Department started going after him for accepting, small bribes, Serpico style,
Look, you can't.
from Turkey,
Right.
that it was therefore really the Biden administration trying to get him back for not being totally on board with shutting up because the migrant issue was a problem and New York City was spending a ton of money on it. And he needed some sort of approach besides just tough it out.
Mm.
Now, that's his perspective.
Yeah.
But I think there's probably a lot of truth in all of that.
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't argue about his believing that. I could see how he would come to that conclusion. But then I guess independently and objectively, should you take this bribe? No, that won't help you with your problem, will it? Is the bribe that they'll house people for you?
You shouldn't have zero ethics. You shouldn't choose.
Right. Let's not do that.
Right. And so the other thing is that he was getting upgrades on airlines for free when he was flying back and forth from Turkey. So he started saying, the Biden administration wants me to shut up and they're going after me because I wanted more legroom. It's ridiculous. And he started getting very sympathetic to the idea that Trump was being hounded by the Justice Department. And that's how come he wound up looking for and accepting a pardon from Trump. And that's the background to all of that. This is strictly from his perspective. Again, I have to say most New Yorkers don't buy it. If you're a crook, you're a crook. And that's how you got in that situation in the first place. But you could see it from Adams' point of view. And that's why this article is so good. It's very hard to make you sympathetic to Adams' point of view. This article tries really hard. And you can sort of get where he's coming from, which is a bad place because, like you said, you shouldn't be a crook in the first place and you set yourself up for this.
Yeah.
Right? You can feel bad for somebody being blackmailed because they're the victim. But the thing that they were being blackmailed about was bad.
Right.
And they set themselves up for it. So, you have to put all of that in perspective.
Yeah, this happens, I think, fairly frequently. Well, with people who feel like they're getting frozen out of anything, but it's particularly in politics, which is susceptible to the bribe system anyway. But yeah, when you start to feel like you're getting frozen out and not getting the attention you deserve, and then someone else starts paying attention to you, even if it's with cash payments, the egoists who go into politics at this level, they gravitate to it.
Right. Adams also has a certain amount of charisma that other politicians don't have. And so some of his rants are quite colorful. And it's an interesting story about New York City politics. And that's why when you look at Cuomo, who also is sucking up to the Trump administration, Adams, who is sucking up for the administration, both of them corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
And Mandami comes in, who's not corrupt. Joe Lawrence had a piece in, I think it was, I can't remember if it was in the Conversationalist or the Argument. I put it up in the Pundit Roundup the other day, about Mandami represents non-corrupt politics, and that's why other people are out to get him. Adams represents corrupt politics, and other people are out to get him. It's not the same thing.
Right. That's the usual play, though. That guy's corrupt. Let's get him. Oh, all right.
Now, there are people, Ellie Honig and others who are, reasonable liberals who think that the Adams charges were difficult to make stick. We never got that far. Other people felt that it was pretty solid stuff and resigned over it. So still a controversy, going to be a controversy, was never tested in court.
Yeah, they didn't allow us to get to that.
Right.
But yeah, it might have been tough.
But life is complicated. And now you have Adams, who called Cuomo a snake, but says, but on the other hand, he's a whole lot better than Mamdani, so I endorse him. My 3 voters should go to him. And really what he's saying is, I prefer the corrupt life and style I know. I can live with this. I understand where he's coming from. I can do business. Mamdani, the anti-corruption guy, I don't understand him, and I'd have a hard time making deals with him.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't make deals by giving him an envelope full of cash, how do you do it? Policy?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know that.
So that's how I read about this.
But he does know something about policy.
But it's just really interesting.
Yeah. He should reach out to him on a policy.
And by the way, the Times article adds, by the time Adams was indicted, dozens of city officials had resigned or been fired, and many had themselves been indicted for allegedly selling contracts and trading favors. An October 24 New York Magazine cover blared, last one out of City Hall, turn out the lights. It's a testament to either Adams' governance or to New York's vast and competent bureaucracy that the city continued to function smoothly despite them.
Yeah, well, just like we're watching 30 days of government shutdown, and a lot of people, except for what's coming later, will tell you, I haven't noticed any difference. Didn't get into a national park, but that's about it.
Again, I just think it's fascinating. There's an element to this. When Mamdani is running, there are elements of which ethnic groups are supporting him and why. Running against Adams and Cuomo, there's the element of clean versus corruption, young versus old or older.
Sure.
It's just really interesting. And so, again, the polls are having trouble picking up who the electorate is going to be, and voters have a really complicated goulash jambalaya to try to pick out, what aspects of these particular candidates are really important to me. And that's why affordability as Mamdani's overall overarching theme has been so good to run on, not just for him, but for other Democrats around the country. And there's the national implications of a New York City mayoral race, which is extraordinarily local.
Yes.
Affordability cuts through all of that.
Money is
on the surface of all the different political stews that people are cooking up.
Yeah. Well, affordability certainly works elsewhere, and different approaches to it will prevail in different parts of the country. But yeah, that's easily transferable, sure. But yeah, kind of a fascinating look inside Eric Adams's head. I don't think it makes.
And again, I've said this before, but I'll say it again.
Better of them.
Stories are important.
They
help you convey what's going on. And if you have a good story to tell it as part of your campaign. Mamdani's really good at that. Adams was good at that, which is how he got elected in the first place. But New Yorkers are looking at this and say, I understand all of this. Adams is really interesting. I get it. I'm not voting for him.
Yeah. Well, that's just sort of a thing with New York City mayors. It's a very difficult place to stay popular in because of the competing factions all over the city. And
it's also very difficult to stay non-corrupt.
Yeah, it really is, or at least to avoid the appearance of corruption, because sometimes you do what you can to avoid corruption and something else happens instead, or there are 5 different directions you could be pulled by a corruption attempt, a bribery attempt, or some sort of influence peddling, and sometimes one of them is the correct policy decision, and so you land on it, and people say, oh, they were bribed into it by that. Well, no, but they did happen to, have a very strong interest in seeing their policy adopted. And did they contribute to my campaign? They did. But, I mean, other people did too. You have to land on something. Everybody's got, envelopes out. Just don't take them.
Now, term limits is not the answer. You have that in Virginia for governor. New York City is just way too complicated to learn everything you need to know to govern effectively in merely 4 years. So I would not be a fan of term limits to try to prevent the corruption from going too deep. 8 years, yeah, I could buy that. Can't run for more than 2 terms. We have that for president. I think that's not a bad model.
Yeah. There's none currently,
but it's not
I
the
guess.
Answer.
Okay. Well, no, it rarely is, but it's an interesting thought. It's just it's a hard place to run, hard place to stay popular in, hard place to duck rumors even if they're not true, harder still if they are true. And it's amazing how many people, how they churn through mayors and they become they win, so they're popular, but then they immediately become unpopular, very often for picayune reasons, and with not infrequently also because cash ends up in their pocket. What can I tell you?
Right. And just
not always
in the moment
mayor,
or two we have before the break, I have to mention this breaking news. You may or may not remember there's a wellness influencer totally unqualified to be Surgeon General of the United States named Casey Means.
Yeah.
She's a close ally of Robert F. Kennedy. She was
of course
nominated. She's supposed to be having a confirmation hearing. She's not because she's going into labor.
Oh.
So that's postponed, but I have to read this piece by, of all people, Eric Erickson, CC Senator Bill Cassidy, writes about Casey Means.
Huh.
Casey Means wrote about how she channeled moon magic, spoke to trees,
good.
and engaged in indigenous wisdom. Casey Means even used the spiritual medium and psychedelics to align herself with spiritual powers and connect herself to the spiritual realm. Notice how many
Nice.
Christians in politics are very quiet about a woman who's not just practiced but advocated occult practice. She's a Wiccan,
Okay.
which is not a dirty word.
No.
But to Eric it is
Well, I
because
don't
she's
know.
not Christian.
Yes.
Being advanced
For him,
Surgeon
yes.
General, many of the very Christians who attacked Tim Keller for his third way approach to faith in politics are not just sitting silently by. Many of them support putting this practitioner of the occult into office. The bros embracing Christian nationalism are really silent about a Wiccan in government. The women who profess themselves Christians first are willing to give the crystals a try. And the President of the United States
right.
has advanced the nomination of a person who engages in witchcraft to be Surgeon General of the United States. And the Christians in politics are either silent or supportive. CC Bill Cassidy, I'm not going to get into what he said other than to point out apparently
That's
she
funny.
has some resistance from the right and from
Guess so.
MAGA people, as well as like normal people who think she's just crazy, not because she's a Wiccan, but because she's crazy and unqualified.
Yeah, well, that's also an issue. Eric Erickson is, it's interesting. I guess he's consistent and he's mad that other people aren't.
Well,
what can I tell you, dude?
sometimes he has these views for a couple of weeks, and then when he loses, he says, "Okay, I'll go." with
I kind of like Wiccans after all. Sure, yeah. I don't know. What can I tell you? It's no help to say, well, supposing he was right about that, or we could shame the Christian conservatives into waking up and coming back to their values. I don't know. I don't think it improves things at HHS in any way. We just have this person, I guess if they resigned, they'd be replaced in all likelihood, not by any sort of competent practitioner, but it's an interesting choice, I guess. And it's weird. And I guess that's what you get when you mash together RFK Jr., who was, in his own orbit and running for president in his own right, as ridiculous as it was, and mash them together with the equally ridiculous campaign of Donald Trump. It's not going to make any sense. Welcome to that reality, I guess, Eric Erickson. Weird though, and I guess I'd be interested in watching Christian conservative ladies adopt crystal healing practices. See how that goes. It's a Jesus crystal. Do you think you can talk people into that?
I don't know.
We'll see. All right, Greg, I appreciate it. Thanks again for carrying us through the first hour, giving me the energy, I think, to forge all the way through to 11 o'clock.
New York City politics is interesting and it has stories. That's all I can say. Yeah, I'm being a homie, but there it goes.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We forge ahead and try and struggle through with what voice we have left. It's not failing, but it's just another stuffy day, making things difficult. As I mentioned up at the top of the show, there is that New York Times article that analyzes, to the extent it's possible to analyze anything that Donald Trump was involved in, his meeting with Xi Jinping of China. He of the great love for the most beautiful chocolate cake from Mar-a-Lago, which he now can offer him at the Rose Garden Club if he should venture into D.C. for a visit at some point in the near future. I liked the headline. Thought I'd share it with you and maybe at least a little bit of the flavor of the article. Under news analysis, we get this headline at the New York Times. The art, not of the deal, but the art of letting Trump claim a win while walking away stronger. The subheader tells us, by withholding soybean purchases and rare earth exports, as they have been doing, China extracted relief from U.S. tariffs and delayed export controls without conceding much in return. Wow, what a deal maker our genius president is. Who's reporting? Lily Kuo and David Pearson teaming up for this piece. When Xi Jinping walked out of his meeting with President Trump on Thursday, he projected the confidence of a powerful leader who could make Washington blink. The outcome of the talks suggested that he succeeded. By flexing China's near monopoly on rare earths and its purchasing power over U.S. soybeans, Mr. Xi won key concessions from Washington. A reduction in tariffs, a suspension of port fees on Chinese ships, and the delay of U.S. export controls that would have barred more Chinese firms from accessing American technology. Both sides also agreed to extend a truce struck earlier this year to limit tariffs. What's clear is that they have become increasingly bold in exerting leverage, and they are happy to pocket any and all U.S. concessions, said Julian Gerwitz, who was a senior China policy official at the White House and the State Department in President Joe Biden's administration. Sounding almost like he was delivering a lecture, Mr. Xi said to Mr. Trump that the, quote, recent twists and turns, unquote, of the trade war should be instructive to them both, according to a Chinese government summary of Mr. Xi's remarks at the meeting in Busan, South Korea. Both sides, there it is again, should consider the bigger picture and focus on the long-term benefits of cooperation rather than falling into a vicious cycle of mutual retaliation, Mr. Xi said. By twists and turns, Mr. Xi was likely referring to the last several months, or nearly a year, of tit-for-tat retaliatory measures in the form of tariffs, sanctions, and export controls. Earlier this month, China escalated dramatically, strengthening its hand by announcing sweeping new limits on the sales of rare earths, critical minerals that are needed for almost all modern technology. Cutting off their supply would cripple U.S. industries. Yes, very much the case. Mr. Xi's message seemed to be Beijing had proven its capacity to hit back, and Washington would do well to remember it. After Trump launched his trade and tariff war, China was the only country that matched the United States blow for blow, said Zhu Feng, a professor of international relations at Nanjing University, noting that the biggest win for China, had to take a short break. The biggest win for China could be that the United States might think twice before imposing new measures on China. All right. Well, I think you're getting the idea here. And there's more to analyze, of course, from their meeting, but I think there's so many other things to catch up on. We might shift gears and take a look at that. I was more interested really in the title of the piece, the justification of the title, and whether or not that's the conclusion the rest of the world will come away with or not. Yes, we're still here. We've got to mute the microphone for your own listening safety at this point every once in a while. But I think we'll be able to make it all the way through here. So meanwhile, I not unrelated, I guess, to the meetings with the Chinese premier, there is also news over the last 24 hours or so that Trump has used his Truth social media platform to announce what he claims is a resumption of nuclear testing for the United States. It's been some 30 plus years since we conducted tests of nuclear weapons. I think we're pretty clear that they work at this point, and it's merely, it's a show of force and a big giant explosion that I guess Trump likes. Even though we haven't conducted these tests for a very long time, when we did conduct them most recently, they were kind of underground tests. They weren't visible giant explosions like at Bikini Atoll or something like that, where we were testing hydrogen bombs, no major mushroom clouds. And I'm curious whether he's trying to get us to go back to above ground, very showy, very destructive testing just to have video. I want to have, as president, I want to see a nuclear explosion that I ordered. I mean, that may be all there is to it. And I don't know whether that's something, I don't know if he's got the staff to talk him out of that or not. And I didn't put an article aside on it, although there was a lot of discussion about it. I mean, I can go grab something now. I mean, it was just so Trumpy. And, I didn't know whether it was worth spending a great deal of time. It was very consequential if it comes to pass. But because it's always a if it comes to pass, it's hard to know whether or not you should be spending any time paying attention to it or not. Let me see. Well, among the many things available besides the reporting of the news, there's a couple of other analytical pieces. And is this current? Yeah. All right. Over into the Atlantic, Tom Nichols writes another intriguing headline, and I want to duck in and see what this is about. Trump is very confused about nuclear weapons. Okay, that's easy to buy. The president says he wants to resume nuclear testing, but doesn't seem to know why. And I was hoping to find out why, but it's Donald Trump, and he may not know. So, I mean, I think that's the story. Here's how Tom Nichols says it. Take it for what it's worth. Just before heading to his meetings with the leader of China, the president of the United States issued some comments about nuclear weapons, or nuclear, as he tends to call them. I mean, he's not mispronouncing it. How do they do it? Nuclear, I guess, when back in the old days when it was kind of a new idea and people somehow mispronounced it widely. But he just says the nuclear. Could be nuclear power. I mean, that's not what he's referring to, but for the rest of us, you might be confused. The nuclear just doesn't make any sense, but there you go. He had some comments about nuclear, as he tends to call them. He wants to resume nuclear bomb tests, something no nuclear state except North Korea has done since the last century, but his reasoning is a bit confused, if you can believe it. In the space of one short announcement, he managed to get a lot wrong, which is worrisome because he's the only person in America who has the authority to order the use of nuclear arms. Everybody else would have to, work their way through the chain of command, but he is the chain of command, or so he thinks. On Wednesday evening, the president placed this post on his Truth Social site, and it's, a lengthy little chunk here. The United States has more nuclear weapons than any other country. This was accomplished, including a complete update and renovation of existing weapons during my first term in office. Because of the tremendous destructive power, I hated to do it, but I had no choice. Russia is second, and China is a distant third, but will be even within 5 years. Because of other countries' testing programs, I have instructed the Department of War to start testing our nuclear weapons on an equal basis. That process will begin immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. President Donald J. Trump signs off. That's it. That's, by the way, how they plan to demolish the West Wing of the White House. Very quick. Rather than waiting a couple of days to tear it down with industrial equipment, you can just nuke the whole thing. There are no issues with that. Almost none of this is right, Nichols points out. Russia has the world's largest stockpile of nuclear bombs, largely because the Russians are still holding on to a lot of smaller tactical weapons designed for use on a battlefield. Trump is correct that China is much further back. The People's Republic probably has something like 600 warheads, meaning that it would have to produce almost 1,000 bombs a year to reach parity with the U.S. or Russia by the end of the decade. Is it possible? Maybe. But Beijing has only added about 100 warheads in the past 2 years. And really, fairly sensible. Any real reason to increase that rate? I don't think so. Also, the United States did not create some shiny new arsenal during Trump's first term. It's true that America is about to spend a gigantic amount of money, roughly $1 trillion, to modernize its strategic nuclear arsenal, but that plan has been in the works since the Obama administration. So what exactly is Trump talking about? Hell if I know, basically, is what we're going to find out, but we'll see whether I can read you the rest of it. I might have to pocket it and read it there. What exactly is Trump talking about? Parsing the president's posts is never easy, but Trump is probably nettled about Russia's claim to have tested a long-range nuclear-powered cruise missile, which I guess they've named Burevestnik. I don't know if the name actually matters. Don't know if I got the name actually pronounced correctly, but I think we can live without knowing the correct. I hope we can live without ever learning the correct pronunciation of their new long-range nuclear cruise missile. All right, let me see if I can open this thing up in Pocket and get to Instapaper and get to the rest of it. Yes, great. Trump shouldn't worry too much. This stupid missile name is a truly stupid idea. Cruise missiles are stealthy and difficult to counter because they can fly low and hug terrain, but they are basically just unpiloted and small aircraft using regular fuel, so they have a far more limited range than ballistic missiles. The Russians, however, now claim that they have a cruise missile powered by a nuclear reactor that can fly halfway around the world. Russian President Vladimir Putin first announced his project back in 2018, and the Burevestnik has all the hallmarks of Soviet-era boasting about a great technological achievement that doesn't provide a lot of strategic advantage. In the old days, the Soviets had a compulsion to claim that the Soviet Union had the biggest and best of everything, leading to the Cold War-era joke that the Kremlin bragged about making the world's biggest microchips. Okay, Russian humor there. In any case, resuming nuclear testing is a terrible idea. Not only because it would undermine America's longstanding commitment to restraining a global arms race, but because detonating nuclear warheads to see if they actually work hasn't been necessary in a very long time. Nuclear tests don't make much sense for U.S. national security, but they're a great way to raise international tensions. During the Cold War, the superpowers sometimes engaged in nuclear tests as a way of signaling nerve and resolve. Unfortunately, these tests served mostly to put both East and West on edge, polluted parts of the United States and the former Soviet Union, and made a lot of people sick. So yeah, I mean, we know that nuclear weapons work. They make very big booms. That's great. Fantastic. We have archival footage. You could repurpose that and say that you just did it. And you could even say this explosion was in Portland if you want to. I mean, you probably will anyway. But, not only do we not need to find out will these weapons work, we know that they do. But if you blow them up, then you don't have them for use elsewhere. And if you want to have both the most bombs and also waste a bunch of them for no reason, it's a lot of money and it doesn't make any real sense. Trump may be stuck in this sort of Cold War mentality, as he is with everything else. His brain is frozen in the 80s. Trying to show his toughness by resuming testing, especially because he seems to take it personally when Russia engages in occasional nuclear swaggering. But Trump is not alone on this issue. Some nuclear hawks will claim that the U.S. deterrent lacks credibility because none of its bombs have been detonated in decades, as if other nations are emboldened by the possibility that America is fielding weapons that won't work. I don't know that there's a lot of other countries basing their military strategy on, don't worry about it, their bombs won't even work, they're very old. Is that even a thing? Do they deteriorate that way, especially if you're actually updating them from time to time? Anyway, in fact, America and other nuclear states have ways of testing every component of their arsenal, and every nuclear-armed nation knows it. Nuclear stability rests on many policies, but no one is contemplating an attack on the United States based on some mad assumption that the response will be a rain of duds. Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that's happening. Of course, another possibility is that Trump's announcement means nothing. Before Trump, statements by the president were policy. But Trump says a lot of things, like Duff Man, right? And he reverses course regularly. Often what looks like important pronouncements turn out to be random thoughts that have escaped the weak gravity of Trump's attention span. In any case, resuming nuclear testing isn't easy. Such tests require a lot of preparation and infrastructure, unless Trump's goal is merely to explode some weapons and call it a test. For now, this announcement about nuclear testing seems to be yet another example of Trump reflexively taking Russian bait. Resuming nuclear testing looks weak and petulant, not strong and confident. No American president should ever let the Kremlin get under his skin, especially not where nuclear weapons are concerned. Yeah, good points, I think, all around. And I don't know. Ought you to be worried about it? Can't tell you. I mean, these things may never go off, not because they don't work, but because he may change his mind or forget about it before he manages to order anybody to do anything, or he may order somebody to do it and they drag their feet and then he forgets. Could be anything. All right. Let's see. Other items to update you on. Yesterday we mentioned that Monday was Greg Bovino's appearance in U.S. District Court in the Chicago area and resulting in a temporary restraining order and other orders from the district judge requiring Bovino to get and use a body-mounted camera, for instance, and all of the officers to do the same. Restrictions on the use of tear gas and other chemical irritants, and more importantly, that Greg Bovino himself, since he loves putting himself on the street and into the mix, you're an important guy, and you need to show up every work day at the end of the day and report to me to talk to me about the use of force by the CBP under your command. And my question yesterday was, well, one, the order was issued on Monday. Did he have to show up Monday night and summarize the day's work, or did they say starting tomorrow? And apparently, I guess it was starting tomorrow because we didn't hear anything about it. Anyway, so today is now the day upon which tomorrow became yesterday. You understand what I'm saying? Tuesday would have been the first day that the order was effective. Did Greg Bovino, that's the big question mark with anybody in the Trump administration, did Greg Bovino honor the judge's order and show up at 6:30 p.m. or whatever the time was that was agreed upon to report on the day's activities? And the answer you're looking for, was yeah. But the answer that you anticipated and in fact got was no. Right, because that is not how this works, apparently. And here's what happened. The temporary restraining order that contained this order to show up every evening was immediately appealed by the administration. And of course, those of you who have been listening for quite a while, or perhaps are practicing attorneys, know that temporary restraining orders are not supposed to be appealable because of their nature, their temporary nature, etc. But they have been making a practice in the Trump administration of insisting that they be allowed to appeal them anyway. And ordinarily, if you're appealing something that's not appealable, you have a pretty weak, you should have low expectations of success at the appeals level. But for the Trump administration, for some reason, they're able to convince appeals courts that they will be suffering irreparable harm if they don't allow them the unusual step of being able to appeal a TRO. So they did, and guess what? They won on one narrow issue, the order for Greg Bovino to show up every evening and account for himself and his troops, which is kind of the point. So that's rather annoying. Anyway, Armando Garcia will tell us the story for ABC News. Appeals court blocks order requiring CBP's Greg Bovino to meet with Judge Daley on Chicago immigration crackdown. Damn. Oh, well. A judge wanted updates to ensure compliance with a TRO restricting use of force. Did they throw the whole thing out? Did they say there was no value to restricting their use of force? No. That, at least, is still operative. An appeals court, and we're talking about the Seventh Circuit here, an appeals court has temporarily paused a federal judge's order requiring U.S. Customs and Border Patrol Commander at Large Greg Bovino to appear in court daily and give updates on immigration enforcement activity in Chicago under the Trump administration's Operation Midway Blitz. The Department of Justice on Wednesday appealed U.S. District Court Judge Sarah Ellis's order, which mandated Bovino check in with her around 6 p.m. daily to ensure compliance with a temporary restraining order that restricted federal agents' use of force in crowd control tactics. By the way, hold that up alongside word that the Pentagon, I got to look this one up, has been readying itself to order that, and prematurely they said we're going to do this for sure, 100%, and everybody is getting scared about it, and with good reason. But once again, will they really be able to pull it off? The Pentagon apparently ready to issue orders that the National Guard in all 50 states, I don't know if they're leaving the District of Columbia out of this or not, to prepare rapid response riot control, or a quick reaction force, I guess as they were calling it, and start training National Guard troops to be able to step in crowd control everywhere, because apparently they, once again, governing as well as campaigning on the platform that America is a hellhole, top to bottom, left to right, and that you need to have quick reaction forces to suppress riots against and rebellions against federal authority everywhere, which suggests that they're anticipating that, which suggests that maybe they're not governing with the consent of the governed, but what the hell. Just wanted you to note that was out there, and perhaps we'll read a little bit about that as well. But first, the DOJ filed that appeal that we were talking about just hours before Bovino was slated to check in with the court for the first time. In its petition to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, the DOJ accused the district court, not just disagreeing, but they accused the district court of exceeding its power and asked the appeals court to immediately pause the order and consider revoking it. Well, all right, that's a little bit unfair. That's the only basis there would be for an appeal. They can't just appeal because, I didn't like that at all. Are you sure that was right? You actually have to allege that you have exceeded your powers. And, well, it worked, at least in part. Ellis's order, issued Tuesday, only underscores the extent to which the district court has exceeded its judicial role by arrogating to itself the role of supervising and micromanaging the day-to-day operations of an executive branch law enforcement agency, the DOJ wrote. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Another way is, no, it's Greg Bovino who is supervising and micromanaging the day-to-day operations of the CBP, and we would like to know whether he's doing it in compliance with this court's orders. And the best and most direct way of doing that is being able to ask him and having him account to us for that. That's not necessarily micromanaging. It's not necessarily the case that Judge Ellis is going to tell him how to run the CBP, but she is going to say, the court has ordered that there are ways you should not be running it, and I want to see that you're in compliance with it. How else do you do it? Ellis had ordered Bovino to appear in her courtroom daily after he took the witness stand on Tuesday in connection, I thought it was on Monday, but I guess not, in connection with a lawsuit she is presiding over regarding immigration enforcement tactics in Chicago. Ellis scheduled Tuesday's hearing to consider a request by the plaintiffs to ban federal agents from using tear gas in Chicago after they raised allegations of multiple violations of a temporary restraining order the judge issued this month. So again, to look at it from the judge's perspective, she keeps issuing restraining orders against the use of what she sees as excessive force in the indiscriminate use of tear gas and chemical irritants, and they keep ignoring them. And so it's gotten to the point where, I'll tell you what, I'm issuing another temporary restraining order, and this is how we're going to enforce it. You have to come in here every day and report to me. It's a little sad that the Seventh Circuit keeps undermining that. We'll see whether it holds up. Anyway, the TRO includes restrictions on the use of force on journalists and demonstrators, and the use of riot control measures like tear gas. In addition to requiring daily reports from Bovino, the judge on Tuesday ordered the government to produce by Friday all use of force reports and corresponding body camera video going back to the onset of the operation on September 2nd. The appeals court granted the government's motion for a stay on that order only to the extent that it required Gregory Bovino to appear in court in person each weekday at 5:45 p.m. That's the end of the article. So Bovino's off the hook for actually appearing at the moment, but the restraining orders, instructions with regard to the use of force against journalists and protesters, and specifically the use of tear gas, remain in place, at least temporarily. Okay. So that's the state of play. But for those of you who enjoyed seeing Gregory Bovino humbled by sitting in court where they can actually do something about his bluster and keep him quiet, we'll have to wait to see whether he has to make that a regular part of his day or not. I think it would be wise to try that out. quite honestly. All right, let's see. Plenty of other things to catch up on, but of course, coming up on the next break, which very much welcome. Gonna clean things up around here, get some clutter out of the way, take in a little more additional liquids, maybe a little gargle as well, before heading into any of the longer reads which we have on hand and which are a critical part of keeping you updated on this Thursday morning. All right, let's see, including, of course, very widely shared excerpts from reporters' books, which is, I guess, how they make their big money these days, and we find out the really important stuff later after the fact. I know it's a very annoying phenomenon, but nonetheless, often revealing something interesting that we either always suspected but now have more ironclad proof of, or occasionally a few surprises that we wish we had known at the time. I think it's the prior case that we're talking about after this.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue with our consideration of everything pending out there, trying to get through a couple of key articles that will help us out. I'm going to head over to fulfill the promise, I guess, of the teaser before the break. MSNBC entry here. Another excerpt from a recent book. Here, I guess, reconfirming things that we always felt we knew, but with, renewed evidence, I suppose. Biden Justice Department slow-walked key decisions in Trump legal probes. I know you must feel like you already knew this, but at the time we were sort of left in the dark. But, well, what are the decision processes? What are they weighing here? It feels like they're slow walking things over to the Department of Justice, but they're probably doing so out of a concern for not looking overly partisan and making sure all the T's are crossed and I's dotted. And that is essentially the case. But could they have taken a different approach? Well, obviously, the Trump administration proves there is a different approach. You can take it. It's not better, but it's probably more satisfying for your base. The picture of a hesitant Justice Department, says the subheader, runs contrary to the GOP allegation, can you believe it, that the indictments of Trump were the product of a Democrat-led plot. And it's an important takeaway from all this. I guess if there's anything that's a positive of proceeding so carefully, given that it also meant, in the end, not proceeding at all, it is that you can logically, if that ever mattered again, defend Democrats from charges that these were purely political prosecutions of Donald Trump and his accomplices. But he's going to make that claim anyway, and there's a certain, 25% of the country is going to believe it unflinchingly anyhow. And newspapers will help the rest of the people scratch their heads about it by saying, well, some say that was the case, in fact. And that the what we're seeing from the Trump administration actually essentially proving the old adage here that every Republican accusation is a confession, by doing exactly that, somehow doesn't help them realize in a way that they can express to their readers that, well, it really isn't the case that both sides have done the same thing here. Both sides were accused of doing the same thing, but one of them has visibly done it and the other visibly tried to avoid doing it. And it ended up costing us our democracy. Anyway. So MSNBC has this piece from Ken Delanian, and it borrows heavily, I believe, from a book published by some colleagues. And I think I forget which one it is already at this point, but we'll read on and that'll all will be revealed. Acting. Oh, I need that, right?
Acting!
Yeah, but a different, not in the acting capacity, but acting on a mix of principle and caution. Justice Department officials under former President Joe Biden made a series of decisions that significantly delayed and ultimately may have hampered the federal criminal investigation into President Donald Trump, according to a new book. And your own eyeballs and your brain and your memory, of course. We all know this. The slow decision-making at the top of Attorney General Merrick Garland's Justice Department. A heavy sigh, I know. And there's been some defenses issued about why you had to do things that way. Back in the day when law and order mattered and politicizing the Justice Department was something to avoid and not actually a career goal. Yes, you would want to do that. But the slow decision-making at the top of AG Merrick Garland's Justice Department affected two major probes into Trump after he lost the White House in 2020. These two probes are, I guess, whether he illegally possessed and obstructed the retrieval of classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago residence. He did. And whether he conspired illegally to overturn the 2020 election. He did that as well. And one of the, unfortunate pieces of fallout from all of this is that even people who know that those things are true are now free to say dumb things that don't even comport with their own personal beliefs, like Lindsey Graham, who I can't recall the context, but was at the microphone yesterday saying, I don't think anybody was interested in the 2020 election until Trump decided to run again in 2024. And then all of a sudden they were interested in it. Oh, yeah, really? January 6th, what have you? You don't think that was worth investigating? The biggest investigation in FBI history? All a hoax, as far as I know. Anyway, far from rushing the Trump cases, FBI and Justice Department officials chose to move cautiously and slowly over concerns about the implications of investigating a former and possibly future president they knew, taking pains to insulate the probes from even the appearance of politics. But what do they get out of that, by the way? They get, both sides do it. That's amazing. And of course, it's not like there wasn't advice out there about that. You'll take pains to avoid the appearance of politicizing the case, and two things will happen. One, you'll fail to be able to bring the case, and two, you will still be attacked for politicizing the case. And no matter what you do, and no matter how carefully you do it, they will just lie and say it was a politicized prosecution. You can do that. They could do that from a position of running against you for control of the federal government and win. They could do that from the perspective of running against you and losing. They could do that from jail through their lawyers. Which one of these things would be the least risky for American democracy? And unfortunately, they said, it would be least risky if there was no possible way that they could accuse us of politicizing these cases, because then they wouldn't be able to politicize cases against us, even if they win. And that is just not true, and it's a dumb decision. And you could say hindsight's 2020, but you know what? We had 2020 vision right at the time, too. It's just, we weren't going to be able to convince Merrick Garland of that. This is not what he's made of, which, you could debate. Anyway, far from rushing the Trump cases, of course, they were actually proceeding more slowly because of the interest in avoiding the appearance of politics. Details of the debates inside the Justice Department and their impact on the Trump investigations, which both sputtered for different reasons, were revealed as part of a new book. It is entitled Injustice: How Politics and Fear Vanquished America's Justice Department by MSNBC investigative correspondent Carol Leonig and Washington Post reporter Aaron C. Davis. MSNBC obtained excerpts of the book before it was published, as I think a lot of people did. But I'm glad they read it because I wasn't gonna. The picture painted of a hesitant Justice Department runs contrary, wow, to the GOP allegation that the federal indictments of Trump by special counsel Jack Smith were the product of a Democrat-led plot to weaponize the Justice Department. I can't believe it. Instead, the book depicts example after example of the opposite happening. And yet, here we are. For instance, it took more than a year after Trump was defeated for the Justice Department to convene a grand jury to hear evidence in the alleged criminal scheme by Trump to use fake electors to overturn the results of the 2020 election. You know, other countries, other time periods, that is a January 7th execution for you. But in this country, we don't do those kind of summary executions. Right. But do we take a year to, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, gee whiz, these came on, this had fake seals on it and they weren't the electors and golly, they signed them and everything. Who should we arrest for that? I don't know. All the people who fixed their signatures to this thing. Well, what about, the claims that they were filing a slate in the alternative? Well, some of them didn't bother to do that. How about the ones that did do it would take a year on? And the ones who said, nope, this is our slate of electors, those guys we move a little faster with. Is that plausible inside the Justice Department? Apparently not. And maybe for better reasons than I anticipate. But there you have it. And even after that grand jury was launched in January of 2022, and I mean, really, at some point you had to think about the urgency of the thing. I'm sure that at that point they figured January 6th is a huge black swan event. No one will ever forget. Why? Even the both sidesers in the press corps, who were in many cases trapped inside the building themselves, that was something we watched with great interest for the first couple of weeks after January 6th. These guys are mad. They were in there. They're not going to have taken this personally. They did. But their editors weren't in there, and the owners of their outlets weren't in there, and in some cases, those guys were cheering the whole thing on. Or at least saying, well, it makes for great copy. And, it's a tried and true formula, both sides. Let's slow things down, make sure we're doing things right. Yeah, okay. Even after that grand jury was launched in January of 2022, I was going to say, the sense of urgency should have come upon you at some point. Joe Biden is actually rather old. And although he has just won the election, and that's great, a lot of people, including Joe Biden at the beginning of this election cycle, were giving the impression that he was going to be a one-term president. He changed his mind later on, then changed it back again as well. But, we've also been through this cycle before with previous constitutional misadventures that ended up being investigated and prosecuted so very slowly that the time ran out on whether it be statute of limitations or an election coming up. Things dragged on so long that courts would then be reluctant to take up the cases because it's too close to an election. But gosh, you have at least 2 years in between them, if not 4 when you're talking about presidential elections. Don't delay. 4 years passes faster than you think. Back to the article. After that grand jury was launched in January of 2022, the FBI debated another 10 weeks before approving a memo formally opening that investigation, further delaying the gathering of evidence. After much, quote, hand-wringing, unquote, by FBI Director Chris Wray's leadership team. And remember, they were conducting the investigation, and Chris Wray is now on Donald Trump's S-word list. I don't know if there's any other way. I keep saying, I don't know why we avoid that one, but that's particularly clunky. Anyway, he's on the naughty list with Santa Trump. But he was appointed by Trump, and like all FBI directors, did come from Republican ranks. And I don't know, he was just wringing his hands for 10 weeks, and golly, I don't know. How did this all happen again? Oh, those Democrats, they're always getting in their own way, except for the ones that are Republicans who are getting in the Democrats' way and then saying Democrats suck. Just saying. After much hand-wringing by FBI Director Chris Wray's leadership team, who may not all necessarily be Republicans, the memo named the Trump campaign, but not Trump, as a subject of the investigation, the book says. And really, how do you separate these two? In the fall of 2022, ahead of the midterm elections, Garland opted to freeze both the classified documents and election investigations because of what some officials believed was his overly cautious reading of a DOJ policy not to take any public action close to an election. So if you are only impaneling your grand jury in 2022 and there are elections in 2022, how do you expect to get all the way through a grand jury probe, further investigation, all the pretrial motions, the trial, the appeals, etc., before running into November of 2022, or indeed, for that matter, June of 2022, when or earlier than that, April, May, March, when people are in primaries. You can't do this and it'll affect my primary. There was no way they were going to be able to do it. Not reading the memo that way, anyway. So there you go. An overly cautious reading of DOJ policy not to take any public action close to an election. Trump was not even on the ballot, of course, and had not yet declared his presidential candidacy for 2024, but Garland nonetheless imposed the freeze. Garland did not respond to a request for comment. His allies have long pushed back on the idea that his decisions imposed undue delays on the Trump investigations. And I guess, to be fair here, I would say, true, Trump isn't on the ballot in 2022, but lots of people who they were considering prosecuting as part of the January 6th investigation were going to be on the ballot. So the fact that Trump isn't there doesn't really explain all that much. They would be better served by talking about who was on the ballot and under investigation. For months, investigators would have to wait to issue subpoenas or interview witnesses to gather new information, the authors write, adding that Garland had chosen to impose a very conservative interpretation of what DOJ officials call the 60-day rule, urging prosecutors to avoid taking public investigative steps within 2 months of Election Day that involved candidates in that election. Ultimately, the Supreme Court imposed its own delay by issuing a historic presidential immunity ruling in 2024 that required Smith to rewrite and whittle down the election indictment, a series of events that proved fatal to the case once Trump won the November election. Smith dismissed the case after Trump won re-election because of a long-standing justice policy, all those things that we're following every time, against prosecuting sitting presidents. It's an open question whether the election case could have gotten to trial before the November 2024 presidential election had the DOJ moved faster. Furthermore, Smith made a strategic decision in the classified documents case that ultimately proved disastrous. Are you ready for that one? According to Leonig and Davis, Smith chose to bring the classified documents case in Florida instead of Washington, D.C., the authors write, in part because they believed more of the alleged criminal conduct happened in Florida. Well, that's actually a pretty solid reason to bring it in Florida. I know that wouldn't be preferred, but I mean, you could make the case, of course, that the stuff was stolen initially from Washington. Yes, but, more of the counts against Trump, i.e., give those things back and him defying court orders to give them back, happened in Florida. It just, has to be tried one place or the other, right? So they believe that more of the alleged criminal conduct happened in Florida. He made the decision after initially underestimating the chances, though, of drawing Florida Federal District Judge Aileen Cannon, a Trump appointee who had already issued a series of unusual rulings favorable to Trump in connection with the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. And I could see sitting there and thinking, well, what are the odds? But what were the odds? There really shouldn't be any odds at all. How did that happen? But it did. Even after they learned the odds of her drawing the case were 1 in 3. Like they probably thought, well, we got better odds against it than that, right? Actually, it's 1 in 3. Wow. Still, 2 out of 3 times we're not going to draw her, so maybe we go with it. 66% chance we're not going to get her. Even after learning that the odds, though, were 1 in 3, Smith and his team stuck with their decision to indict Trump in Florida. Cannon eventually got the case, setting in motion a chain of events that led her to later dismiss it on what many legal experts say were also highly questionable grounds. I guess at this point, I mean, it feels almost unfair, but I do want to point out again, just as we pointed out, Chris Wray, director of the FBI, just like all the other directors of the FBI, a Republican. Jack Smith, too, a Republican, as all special counsels tend to be, because the base rule is if you're prosecuting a Republican, you got to have a Republican prosecutor. Otherwise, Republicans will say this has been politicized. And because if you put a Democrat in charge of prosecuting a Republican, they're going to press a partisan case. So it has to be a Republican. Sure, it can be a Republican that you trust the integrity of whose integrity you are not in doubt. Let's say it that way. But it should be a Republican nonetheless. And then, of course, you do that, and then they say, that guy's a rhino. We hate him anyway. He's a turncoat and a traitor. Now, on the other hand, if you are prosecuting a Democrat, obviously you need to have a Democratic special counsel, because otherwise Democrats will come. What? I'm sorry. This just in. Actually, if you're prosecuting a Democrat, you must have a Republican special prosecutor or special counsel, because otherwise everyone will think that the Democratic special counsel is going easy on his fellow Democrat. So heads I win, tails you lose it. Everybody doing this stuff has to be a Republican. Always, and for various reasons. Thank you. Okay, well, now that that's cleared up. The excerpt that Leonig and Davis's book, the excerpt which appeared on Monday in the Washington Post, is where this information came from. Cannon eventually got the case, setting in motion that weird chain of events that led her to dismiss on highly questionable grounds. Taken together, the decisions described by Leonig and Davis show that Garland, Smith, and others supervising the cases leading to the federal indictments against Trump were straining to give the former president every benefit afforded under DOJ norms and policies. Surely he would return the favor. They faced criticism then from Democrats who wanted them to move faster, but no evidence had surfaced showing that anyone from the White House imposed that sort of pressure, the way it's supposed to be. 9 months into the Trump administration, Trump allies have not produced evidence establishing that any decision in the cases was made for political reasons, or that any White House official or Biden partisan had any influence over the investigations of Trump. They followed all the norms, so they would be protected from these kinds of accusations. So haven't they been? No, they have not. It's almost as if that policy is worthless when it comes to exercise by Democrats. That is weird. So in the book excerpts obtained by MSNBC, the authors also report Kash Patel, who also is in the news today for apparently flying around the country on his FBI-paid jet, this time to go on a date with his girlfriend, meeting her in Pennsylvania for a wrestling event, and then flying her back and maybe going with her to Tennessee and then back to work in Washington, D.C. But just want to let you know, if you are losing your SNAP benefits, don't worry about Kash Patel. He's still going out on taxpayer-paid dates. But Kash Patel in this excerpt says he is, of course, outlined as the future FBI director at the time. He backed away in a November 2022 closed-door grand jury testimony from his earlier public claims that the Mar-a-Lago documents probe was improper because he had personally witnessed Trump declassifying reams of documents en masse while he was still president. And Patel was a senior White House aide, right? And all of this stuff is nonsense. You have to dismiss this case because none of these documents were classified. I saw him declassify them, he said publicly. Called before a grand jury, he said, maybe I didn't see that. I'm not so sure about that. He did not tell the grand jury that he saw that. After hours of testimony, prosecutors would later tell others in an update, Patel pulled back somewhat from his on-air statement, saying he only knew about Trump's efforts to declassify a specific set of documents and didn't know about the larger expanse of records found at Mar-a-Lago. So no en masse here. Patel has refused to comment on his testimony and so continues to get away with it. The leaders of the congressional investigation into the January 6th attack, Representatives Benny Thompson, the Democrat of Mississippi, and Liz Cheney, Republican of Wyoming, until she was chucked out of the party, initially refused to give the Justice Department full access to the evidence they had gathered, which also contributed to some delays in the election investigation. Gotta point that out. A veteran national security prosecutor at the Justice Department, George Toscas, and by the way, on that delay, I believe we actually knew that, and I think Marcy Wheeler has reminded us of it several times. But again, now over to this other point, George Toscas, national security prosecutor, thought it was a mistake to name the same special counsel to investigate both the classified documents and election cases. It's going to look like the anti-Trump investigation, Toscas said. Okay. At the White House's instruction, Trump appointees removed Toscas from his national security position hours after Trump's inauguration. And so, I don't know what that was supposed to get him, but it was good advice, and for that reason, he was going to be removed anyway. But I guess no one's surprised here by that. But an interesting point. I don't know whether I would have agreed at the time. We'd have to hear those arguments about whether or not it would have been wise to have two different special counsels, probably both Republicans, operating on these fronts. But, if the issue was optics, you weren't going to get any advantages. No one would agree that the optics were better on the Republican side. They would just attack them nonetheless. Why? They're wasting even more money having two special counsels, even though both of them are Republicans. I don't think that would have been too difficult to anticipate. All right. Time for anything else to be shoehorned in. There were a few other things. You know what? Here's an item that looks like it's pretty short, and maybe we can get it in, and is otherwise escaping national notice. This is from the Capitol News Service. That's at CNS, Capitol News Service, cnsmaryland.org. It's happenings over in Annapolis, that capital. Local immigration court, this is interesting, ousts reporters from hearings. What's going on here? The government shutdown is being blamed here. The government shutdown means journalists may not have access to immigration proceedings anytime soon. One local leader is, quote, appalled. Let's find out which one and why. I think we're getting the why. Ruby Sivkin and Lillian Glaros are the reporters for this CNS piece. Datelined Hyattsville, Maryland. Federal officials ordered two reporters out of immigration court on Tuesday and barred them from observing future proceedings until they get permission from the Trump administration. But the two Capitol News Service reporters couldn't get permission that day and may not be able to do so for this foreseeable future. That is because the Department of Justice employee who processes the requests is on furlough due to the federal government shutdown. How convenient. Immigration hearings are still proceeding in the Hyattsville Immigration Court, but observers who disclose that they're journalists aren't supposed to witness them. The ouster of journalists, why? Alarms some local officials, including Jolene Ivey, an at-large member of the county council in Prince George's County where the court is located. That's a close-in D.C. suburb. Hyattsville being part of Prince George's County, I guess, where the court is located. She said she is appalled by the situation that currently provides no remedy for as long as the shutdown goes on. And of course, that won't bother the Trump administration at all. I'm kind of shocked because our country is built on a free press, Ivey said. If the press can't access immigration hearings at a time like this, then the press isn't free. Obviously, the press is being handcuffed, almost literally, by a situation that was created by the president. The ouster is a departure from usual practice in the past several weeks. Several CNS reporters have been sitting in on proceedings in Hyattsville during September and October, including a session of hearings in the courtroom of Judge Dinesh Verma. I mean, it does strike me as odd. No one has complained to date that reporters couldn't access these courtrooms. But now all of a sudden they can't. Verma let one CNS reporter stay in that hearing, but ordered two staffers out on Tuesday. I don't know why. He did not return phone calls to discuss why the practice had changed. The reporters were then escorted to the court's main office and referred to a furloughed employee at the Communication and Legislative Affairs Division of the Department of Justice. An automated response told callers that the employee was furloughed by the lapse in federal funding. If you can't get through to them, we can't help you in any other way. Court Administrator Neil Andrade, maybe, told CNS, could be Andrade, but okay. During 2 months of visits, The CNS staffers always complied with judges' requests, identifying themselves as journalists whenever asked. Several judges have permitted them to observe courtroom hearings alongside law students, lawyers, and members of the public. So what's the issue? Before Tuesday, CNS was not aware of a requirement that the press notify the DOJ, or its Executive Office for Immigration Review, of its plans to observe hearings. EOIR, Executive Office of, what are we talking about? EOIR, run the immigration courts. I don't know exactly what that is. Now that I think about it, we can look it up. But dozens of people come through the Hyattsville court on any given day to request asylum, make other appeals, or answer notices to appear for alleged immigration violations. Almost 8,000 new proceedings were filed in Maryland in the fiscal year ending September 2025, according to TRAC, Syracuse University's Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse. Some of the 8,000 cases are heard in Baltimore's immigration court. The others are heard in Hyattsville. The Hyattsville court takes up 2 floors of an office building around the corner from the Prince George's Mall. Judges in several different courtrooms hold public sessions and closed-door hearings throughout each work week. The DOJ says that when observing an immigration court hearing, members of the media must identify themselves to the immigration court front desk staff upon arrival, as stated in an EOIR fact sheet. That's not becoming a problem either, is it? Judges in the Hyattsville court often ask the observers to identify themselves and explain why they're in court, specifically whether it's to observe or participate in hearings and whom they represent. Judges sometimes want to know who's in their courtroom because of the sensitive nature
networksradio.com
and vulnerable status of the people involved.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
All good points, but no explanation here as to why that situation has changed or what danger, if any, they may be posing by being there, except reporting on what's happening. And, of course, the shutdown making things worse. Making things better, though, is the fact that the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes up next. Justice Putnam will do his own roundup of news from around the country and around the world.